Well, good morning. I'm Bronwyn Morgan, and I am with Wings Drones. I am an innovation consultant. I work primarily on the future, working with clients usually 20 and 30 years ahead of where they are now. And so I'm always talking about what's coming and creating things that don't exist. And the drone space is the first space where I decided to put down a flag outside of my traditional company. Everybody said, well, why are you doing that? I said, trust me, I know what's coming. And so I think this is a really smart move and a very smart play for all of us that are here. So how many of you are drone pilots already, Part 107 certified? Great. How many of you, exactly, right? How many of you consider yourselves entrepreneurs, right? Okay, awesome. This is the world I live in. So we've got three amazing people up here that I have become pretty close to over the last couple of weeks. I'm in the Atlanta region. And let me just introduce them first, and then let them tell you a little bit more about themselves. Then we're going to jump right into some questions and then open the floor to you. First is Thomas Wilson with WCNC-NBC Charlotte, and also with TC and DroneCLT Company. Jeff Hemming with Carolina Drone Imaging and Carolina Drone Academy. And then Bob Johnson with Johnson Consulting, who is a UAS Drone Emerging Technologies Consultant. So before we go too far in, tell us a little bit more exactly about what you do and how you got there. How'd you get started?
So I work at NBC Charlotte. I'm a photographer, and I work primarily behind the scenes. I'm a camera guy, and I work with drones. I'm their chief head pilot there, running their drone department, and then started to branch off and do my freelance work with my own Wilson Aerial Productions, and then DroneCLT. I freelance for them. And I run and manage 3 drone programs. That's about 7 or 8 drones, and all in the Charlotte area. So.
Wonderful.
Yeah, every day flying a lot.
And he just got married.
I did just get married about a month ago, so my wife's in the second row there. So.
Very good.
Bob.
Great. My name is Bob Johnson. I'm in Atlanta. I am an independent consultant. Name of my company, Johnson Consulting and Advisory. I mainly focus on a lot of the things that you're not doing here today, and that is infrastructure inspection. Basically, I'm in one of those areas that is dull, dirty, and dangerous. I work at working with utilities, telecom providers, railroads, search and rescue to help basically collect and process and distribute the data. Thank you. Go ahead.
And I got to tell you, that is a really up-and-coming solution right now. We learned that from all the post-disaster, you know, the 2 hurricanes and that's a solution. And beyond line of sight is going to be probably the difference maker there. But I'm Jeff Hemming, and I got into drones as a service operator, as a pilot. I was a non-aviator, and so I went through the 107 that first week that it went live. Fell in love with drones before that, and just decided that, you know what, this sounds like a great opportunity, and tried to identify a couple of markets that I could create solutions with. And while I was out flying, all the time we were getting questions over the equipment, over, you know, how did you learn this, how did you learn that? And so we started speaking at the university there in Columbia, and then the American Society Media Photographers and that, and we said, you know what, let's put together a formal solution. So I partnered up with CFI at the time, the guy that has probably trained about half of the state's pilots there in South Carolina, and we started Carolina Drone Academy. So good to be part of this group here.
Yeah, I mean, some really great insight here. And I think this one workshop in particular, I was supposed to be on the panel and he asked me to moderate. I think it's probably the main reason most of us are here. You know, how do you really turn this into a business? I've been an entrepreneur for 13 years, came from big corporate. And, you know, this is hard. This is not easy. I don't suggest people do it unless they're really ready for it. So what would you say, especially in an industry that's emerging like this one, that people should do to get started? How should somebody really prepare to get started in this business? Because the cost of entry at the very beginning is pretty low. Take the exam, $150. Get a drone, and it's not going to put you out too much. You got to get insurance, and then you're going to need another drone. What would you suggest? Let's start down on the end.
Well, first, I think you have to enjoy it. I mean, you're putting something up in the air and capturing an image that's from a different perspective, and it's really transforming with the way people market their videos, brand their videos. It's something that you don't see from the ground. So I think you have to enjoy it first. I got involved by buying my first drone because our television station lost their chopper. So I was like, I'm gonna figure out how to capture the images from the sky for our news station. And so the rules weren't out for the 107 yet, so our TV station said, let's pump the brakes, let's wait till corporate comes out. And so I just started listening to podcasts, learning from professionals on how to do it safely and the best way possible to make marketing and branding videos for companies. And so then I bought my first drone. It's an investment, I think one people have touched on it in this conference is that you want to get the drone that fits what your niche is. If you're video production, looking at Inspires, looking at Phantoms, if you're looking at mapping, if you're looking at infrastructure, you want a higher industrial drone. So, and then of course insurance is the hardest part. If you're looking for big contracts, a lot of the bigger companies are going to ask you for big insurance policies. So you want to make sure that you have the passion backing, the ability to get into the field.
I think one of the major things is you've got to figure out when you're starting a business is like, what am I bringing to the table? In other words, people don't really care what you've done in your past. They want to know what you're going to do for them and basically what kind of value that you're going to bring them. I've been asked, how did you get into the drone industry? I've got 30 years in the telecommunication industry, and I've built networks, wireless infrastructure, been on towers, I've worked with railroads. But how do you parlay that into a business? I was with a company, we were the first in the state of Georgia to get a 333 exemption. This was 4 years ago. We were early adopters, and now the Part 107 has come out, and it has really turned everything, as we've heard all 2 days here. The barrier of entry is very much lower now than it was when people had the 333. I got into this aerial photography about when I was 10 years old, as my dad was a professional photographer, and they would hire him to go up in a Cessna 172 for new business that was coming into our rural county in Alabama and make aerial photos. And we were doing drone footage back then that we didn't know what we'd be doing today. So we would collect it, which would take the picture, we would process it, which we would turn it to color, black and white, and then we would distribute it, which is we would sell it, which is basically, I think, what we're all doing up here as far as we're bringing the content and solving a solution.
Good, good. The first step is research, right? What you're doing in here, you're trying to figure out ideas and where could I fit in, and it comes down to, a lot of us, myself included, went out, I bought a bird, and I thought, you know what, I've got a 107, and people are gonna come knocking on the door, come ringing my phone, things like that, and what history has proven is it doesn't quite work out that way, right? Colin Snow, he's a good guy to keep up with. Look him up. I think it's Drone Analyst. He does a lot of research across a lot of sectors, and he just did one earlier this year, I think it was. And only about 15% of the drone pilots are able to make a full-time living right now. So if you're not at that level, you're with the majority, right? And so back up, do some research, and figure out, what do I know that I could plug it into? Maybe you know a little bit about GIS. Maybe if you're a photographer, you've got a perfect outlet there on how you can approach clients, and it's just another tool, right? What you can do with that, and figure out if that's not an avenue, then start researching where the drone solutions are working right now, because at the enterprise level, the ones that it's working for, they're really hush-hush on what they're doing, because they want to get ahead of the market with that. And so the other thing you can do is join the Facebook groups, get involved with the other pilots, those folks, figure out what's going on out there, because they're experiencing the same thing you are. And so if you can partner up with them and learn from them, and then maybe even form a little bit of a colleague association where you share things, that's another great way to go. You share the resources and things like that. But it comes down to any business. If you figure out what problem you can solve for people, and then you've got to figure out what you can charge for that, and if you can make the money with that and get that return on whatever your cost is.
Well, thank you. Thank you to you, right along with what I was going to say. I love it. But yeah, as an entrepreneur, and as we teach entrepreneurship, which I've done at the university level, it is, what problem are you solving? Is it, you know, like you said, I've got a drone, and hey, people are like, and what does this do for me? What value does this provide? And so understanding that real value proposition is, I think, spot on.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of videos of the drones at 300 and 400 feet now, right? But it comes down to, like, well, if you listen to the guys at CNN, what story, how does it fit into the creative storytelling? You know, if you're a reporter, I know you probably got a lot to say about that one, but the data collection, what data is it that you're collecting? What is it that you're fitting
Absolutely. And so that brings me to the next question, which I think will fit right into this, because I want to talk in a minute about the business model. But before we talk about what is your business model strategy and pricing, because that's come up quite a bit as we've been surveying people, what's your target audience, so specifically? Because you're in a journalism focus.
Yeah, so I have two. With TV, we're looking to, you know, cover news of the day. So a couple weeks ago, we had tornadoes hit the northern part of our demographic in our TV station in Charlotte. So there was no heliports, no airspace that was restricted. So we were able to go out there and capture homes that had been ripped off their bases and use that in a story. And the reporter actually sent me a text later in the day. He was following up on the story, and he said, I didn't even use any of my ground video because the video in the air was so good. So sometimes we got to realize that the video from the air, if you know the right way to fly, if you know creative angles, if you know positioning and cinematic ways to shoot, can be the focus, and that can drive the story. Now for video production, I do a lot with companies in Charlotte and local businesses, and their focus is branding and marketing. So how can I demonstrate their company's building or their real estate area? And once again, it kind of goes back to what I just said. It's the pilot's skill level and being able to have that eye and that, hey, let me put the drone down low and go up. Let me know how to use the autonomous features where I can do a perfect circle around the property that captures the image. So it's all about, in my opinion, it's all about getting out there and flying and repetitively flying, so that way you can master certain shots that can separate you from your competition.
Interesting. Bob, what is your target market?
Yeah, I primarily focus on the industrial sector. Again, the telecom people, the tower people, the ones that are building towers, the utilities, the guys that really have to do an inspection, things like pipelines, where do you have to put a man or a woman in an aircraft, or can we do that from a drone? And the first thing that I think we all agree in this room is you've got to be safe first. And that's why the Part 333 went to 107. That was a bridge. And safety comes before anything else. I've heard a lot of the journalism guys here today with CNN, and they go, you know, I heard Greg a couple of years ago, he said, Greg Agvent with CNN, he said, you know, you got to watch these photographers because they're going to say, get that shot, I got to have it for this. And it's like, well, wait a minute, that's we're not supposed to fly over people, or we're not supposed to fly 45 minutes after sunset. You know, that's not the twilight area. And sometimes you have to be able, you know, to say no. So that's more or less who I try to sector on.
So if we're talking about target markets, you know, I can tell you when I first got my 107 and I got a bird, I picked up the Phantom, and it was a Phantom 4 at the time. And I networked everywhere I possibly could. You know, the chambers, making calls on construction sites, everything like that, and just trying to figure out really what I could do and what I couldn't do, because you're reading all of this stuff in the print. And if you got a drone, you can do mapping. If you've got a drone, you can sell customers surveys. And legally, in most states, you can't unless you're a surveyor. So you got to be careful with that stuff on what you advertise you can and can't do. So it comes down to really any business, what's the number one thing as an entrepreneur? You got to sell, right? It's a lot easier if you can figure out where is that niche ahead of time. And so if you get out and you start talking, and you know, if you've got an interest in something, whether it's maybe you got a past in construction, what you're going to find is a lot of construction companies have drones and they're flying them now, but they don't have certificated pilots. So you've got to come in with that idea of, you know, I can mitigate the risk for you. Here's what I can do, right? What's your in with that individual? You know, Josh, I don't know if any of you saw him speak yesterday with Kitty Hawk, but you know, I was chatting with him last night. He's talking about Kitty Hawk is a software for managing enterprise fleet and that with drones. And you know, he was talking about using that as a tool to differentiate yourself from the other folks in the market. You know, because I'm able to manage everything from A to Z with my aircraft, you know, because legally as a 107, you've got to document, you've got to log, everything from a pre-flight to the, you know, after the flight, everything from maintenance. And, you know, so he was teaching people how to do that with his software to reposition themselves against other folks. I think that it's at the point where, can you find where people are doing things with manned aircraft that might make better sense using a drone? Start thinking in that regard, a little bit of creativity there. Don't believe everything you read in print that there's going to be $127 billion in this market, you know, in the next 4 years. Figure out where your space is. What's your space? And you don't have to have 10% of the market. You just need to figure out that niche and then hone in on that one. I spend 80% of my time now training. I filmed for some of the media companies that I went out knocking on doors earlier. Filmed some things there for commercials. Happy to say that I've got one that's going to appear on ESPN. You know, you do those little things, and you know, you're all the time on television. You know, that what a thing to pound your chest over, right?
Well, I would add to that safety is a good way to pitch to your clients. I mean, we've gotten a couple jobs because the client has said our you know, one of the construction sites we're doing, they said we had to boot the old guy because he didn't have insurance. And so if you can go in there and demonstrate, like you have those drone logbooks and can say, hey, this is my track record, this is my history from a standpoint of delivering on a product and then delivering on safety, that's a game changer. And another underrated point is social media. Obviously, as being part of the younger generation, my start was pumping videos on Instagram, pumping videos on Facebook and Twitter, and through my network, that got me some jobs from a standpoint of being able to somebody go, oh wow, that's something different. I haven't seen that before. Right. So you may think the 10-second little teaser video for a client may not be anything. I've gotten a couple jobs based on somebody being like, let's sit down and have a meeting over that. So social media is a big part too.
Yeah, even with social media presence, even I just got last night, and so just coincidence, I got 2 text messages, and they were 2 people said, hey, are you going to bid on this project, Fulton County? I was like, I didn't even know it was out there. I'm busy. Busy this week.
They need drones.
And
they probably have a few.
I know, right? And they were like, I just want to come like tag along. This is another pilot, and he was like, so would you go do the heavy lifting, and then I'll come along? I was like, well, wait a minute. So people, do recognize you as you start to kind of build up a presence, but build a presence because this is a space, no pun intended, where a lot of people just don't know about it yet. They don't really understand it. I was talking to some friends of mine, and they bought their son a drone for his birthday. Good kid. He was out flying near Highway 20 and just having a good time. Drone crashed into the neighbor's house. No big deal. Get the drone and fix it back up and keep going. Flying over the highway and not too far from Charlie Brown. And so when I got over there and they told me what was going on, he was so excited, and I said, guys, do you know how much liability you just opened yourself up to? I said, that drone would have crashed on the highway and killed somebody. I said, they're waiting to make an example out of somebody. I said, they're coming after the house, they're coming after your retirement and everything, because your homeowner's insurance isn't going to cover this. And your kid, well-intentioned, and he meant no harm. I said, this is what, could happen. They all were just standing in the kitchen like that, and he's like, son, go put that on eBay right now, and I'll buy you a car. And so he was like, yes, thank you for coming over on Bronwyn. And so I was like, well, that wasn't the purpose. I just want you to fly safely. You have to get rid of the drone, but you got to fly safely. And you got to understand, you do need to document. You're just so spot on. People I just want to go. No, you got to make sure that you're checking all the boxes. And so when you think about running this as a business, there's 2 questions beyond what problem are you solving in the value prop, and the obvious ones around flying safely, especially if we're Part 107, we know that. But how do you really create a business model once you do know that target that really delivers profit? Because I've heard from a couple of people, and I've asked some people, how do you really price yourself so that you really are getting value? And people are like, I don't know, I think this is the right, and some people are coming in undercutting for what little bit of business that people have been chasing thus far. I just want it, so I'm just going to do it. Well, then that creates a very false sense for the buyer, because they're just like, well, the last guy charged me $200, and you're charging me $7, and it's just like, well, this is really a $700 job based on what I'm doing, what I've got. The other person didn't have insurance; they didn't know what the right questions to ask. So how do you really turn this, create a business model in your area that you think makes a lot of sense? And then the second part of that is, how do you scale? Because some of you, have gone from doing a couple of small jobs to now you've got a business with a presence. So business model and then scale. Boom, boom, boom.
So our business model with DroneCLT is we have 4 guys and kind of our niche, and we're still getting off the ground. We're in that 15%. We're trying to get to that 15% where we're all full time with it. We have 4 guys who they have their niches. We have our head CEO who knows how to nail down contracts, and he's really talented at. I'm our head pilot. We have a guy who's really great with website graphics and editing, and then we have a 4th guy who does business development and is out there promoting. So I think if you know what your niche is, you know how to pursue it, like you were saying. And, ours is video production, real estate. We don't like the pressure of weddings, so we don't do weddings. So we identified we don't want to do something, we're not going to do it. And so that's kind of our business model. And then delivering on the product, we have standards that we set. We deliver a product within 2 days. We're delivering it whatever setting you want. We have stipulations in our contracts that will cover us, but at the same time, if we didn't get a shot you wanted, we'll go back out and get it. So it's just having that ability to deliver a product that the client will be happy with, and that you can take away and show to the next client, because we have different demo reels for different things. We do golf courses, we show the golf course demo reel. We don't show them the real estate home. So you have different demo reels for different target markets that you're aimed at.
Yeah. I think from just a very local standpoint, when you go after customers, this is all new to these guys out there. They don't understand drones, they don't understand the laws, and they're looking to you for management. So I think that, first of all, you've got to talk to your customers like people and not like customers. You got to understand what they're wanting and what are they trying to achieve. I know a lot of times people will go in and they'll sell the product they have, and it's like, maybe I don't want that product. Why don't you sit back and listen to me and let me tell you what I'm trying to do. And that's the way I try to approach it sometimes, is that I will back in. I will go up and I'll say, what are you doing now? How do you do it? And how much are you paying? Okay? That gives, those 3 questions right there give me a lot of information that I can ask more questions on. So you help educate that customer. You maybe help relationships that will open more doors for that customer. And to answer the second part on scaling, in my business, if I'm doing an oil leak on the West Coast, how many oil leaks are there going to be? There's going to be 1. So I've got to fly my third party. I've got to fly my information out to the West Coast. So that's a one-shot deal. I'm probably not going to make any margin on that. So how am I going to get repeat business on this? What I'm trying to do is get a subscription type service. So again, that's why I do a lot in the infrastructure, is that maintenance is a big deal. On a cell tower, you're supposed to change that light bulb every 90 days by FCC laws. Can a drone change a light bulb? Not those kind of light bulbs.
Not yet.
Not yet. But you ask those kind of questions. What else are you doing? So sort of understand what the value is, and how do you articulate that, as we say in the big term, the value proposition. What can I do that someone else is not doing, and how do I differentiate myself? And when you differentiate yourself and show that, you're bringing them value, and you might be getting a customer every month, and that's how you build your business in my book.
And your business is is it on the enterprise side? Is that predominantly?
It's mostly on the wholesale side, the carrier side, the
Okay.
utility side.
Okay.
A lot of the enterprises definitely starting to get into that.
And those are the
drones.
solutions that, as they've evolved, and you know, you kind of hear about them here and there, but they don't get a lot of publicity.
Right.
You know, at this point in time, you know, for the average person like myself, where you're going out and you're thinking, you know, this is a great opportunity. I've got some good ideas. I've got a lot of gumption. I'm going to work hard at this, right? And I mean, that's exactly what I was thinking in the beginning. And you know, you go out, you do your research, you do a lot of networking, you try and find that, and then you've got to understand what your costs are. I don't know, what's the failure rate on businesses nowadays?
Startups is 95%.
In what, 3 years, 2 years?
Startups usually within the first 24 to 36 months, yeah.
You know, so we got a lot of numbers working against us there, right? And you know, so nobody wants to be part of that number. Everybody wants to be part of the other one. So what do you do to set yourself up for success? And the number one thing that I hear from the Small Business Association is not knowing the cost, right? You know, once they know the market and the solution, you got to identify your cost. So there's some organizations out there like the MPPA that has a cost of doing business calculator, where you can go in and you can program these things in there, you know, with the cost of your bird, the cost of your equipment, right? Because your batteries only have so many cycles in them, and you've got to know that when you need to replace those. Your props are only good for, you know, what, 3 dozen hours or something now, I think 50 hours at the most. All of those things, and so you've got to build that in, not to mention if you're going to do any advertising, marketing, or you know, if you want to get a logoed shirt and things like that. So you program all that in, and then you've got to figure out, what do I need to make a living on top of that? And so, you know, we see a lot of folks come into the market, and you know, I go, you know, I'm going to do a couple for free. You know, and there's a lot of debate about that in different circles, and there's people a lot smarter than me can figure out what's a good plan on that, and you probably have a lot more experience than I do. You know, do I discount it? Do I offer it for free? The number one thing you got to realize is, what price point do you need to really be at, and figure that out, because a lot of times we don't. We walk in and you know, we'll grossly undervalue ourselves, or we can't cover our cost, and then 6 months, 12 months, you know, the bills outrun what we've earned. So we got to make sure we price that right, and that's what you were talking about. Scalability, you know, I'm a believer in, you know, I don't need to have a big scaled operation. I'm not looking to do every, I don't know, what does AT&T have? 52,000 cell towers, I heard? You know,
150.
150,000? Oh my gosh. See, you know.
And that's not rooftops.
See, I don't need that, right? You know, so when we're talking about scalability, what do I need? What's in my market? And, you know, so I really focused in on South Carolina, and I've gotten to know a lot of the drone pilots over there. You know, got folks, we actually have a meetup today, you know, so maybe that's something you can help do to help thrive your community, whatever it is. Get your pilots together, start talking about this stuff. And, you know, that way people are operating on the same platform. How are you covering your cost if you're going out and doing that job for $25, $35, $100, whatever it is? So figure out that cost where you need to be. You know, it's the same thing in any business.
And you got to know also when to walk away, you know, when it's just like, this is, thank you for the opportunity, but this just doesn't work. And if they want to go get something else, because you know, everybody's got a budget, and sometimes they just need, you know, maybe a little intern doing a little bit of something, hopefully safely, and that's all they can afford, and that's okay. But you do have to watch your value. But it's all about also building your brand. What is your brand? What does your brand stand for? What is your marketing value? What does your marketing mean? What is your statement of purpose? You know, what is your message? When people hear about your brand, what do they think? It's all of that, and now the old brand side of me is coming out from my days at Procter & Gamble, but it was beaten to our head about the value of the brand. But yeah, you bring up some really relevant points also about it, but you were about to say something, Tom.
I was just saying, it's so true. There's times where you have to say, no, I can't do that job for that amount, because you've established a price range and a platform of what your product is worth. When I first got into it, I took my drone everywhere. You go to beaches, I'd fly. I'd go to vacation, I'd fly. And I would build up scenic shots. I would build up some type of catalog. And then when I did a couple jobs for free or at a low price, and then with those clients, I said, hey, the next couple jobs, I'm trying to build a platform. I will give you a little bit of a discount, but this is my standard. And Most of them have gone or stayed with me because they understand the worth of the product. So I think you definitely have to set a barrier of knowing what you're worth, and you can't control what other people do. I pitch safety, and I'm regulated, I pitch that I'm certified, and if the client doesn't go with me and they choose the unlicensed operator, I can't do anything about it.
Right, and you just gotta know what that is. And I wanna talk just quickly, because I know there's a lot of questions out here. Resources, and then we're gonna talk about the future, and then open it up, because there's so much to be said. There's so many resources available to your community, from the SBA, the SPDC, local universities. I mean, you've got people that are available to provide guidance, to help, business model strategy, marketing dollars, marketing money, marketing support. So there's a lot available to you. And you mentioned the meetups. Somebody said, well, you want to go and share all this with other people that are doing it? I said, everybody in this industry, because it's so new, they're so confused anyway. I don't really see anybody as like, there's really the whole idea of competition. When I work for Coke, yeah, I don't want to go sit and talk about trade secrets with Pepsi. But when it comes to this industry, I said, everybody's trying to like, hey, how do you do that? And I don't think we're really bumping up right now. I can't say, oh my God, he's just taking all my business. Do we even really know what the share of business is that we're going after? Can you even measure market share yet? No, I wouldn't even see that as an issue. The other thing I want to talk about, and I mentioned this at one of the first UAV working group meetings that I ever attended, because I'm on the business side and the aviation side of things, but as drone pilots and as those of us who are running companies, we have to think about what's coming next, because we're going to be kind of outsourced pretty here quickly with AI and autonomy. And we got to be thinking about the next thing. And actually this morning, this was a magical morning for text messages. There was an article that came out. It talked about the 6 jobs everyone will want in 2040. It's under Yahoo Finance. Virtual store manager, I like that. Can I stay at home and manage a store? That's not what they mean. Robot mediator, robot trainer, drone traffic controller. And I was just like, yeah. So in 2016, more than 670,000 drones were registered with the government, with the FAA. And so now with Beyond Line of Sight becoming a reality, this whole idea of UTM is a real issue. What are you thinking about? Really kind of like 5 years from now, 4 years from now, because this is going to happen very, very fast. So how are you not only preparing yourself now with the skills that you have in the outlook, but how are you going to prepare yourself, for the next 5 to 7 years? So I don't think anybody is in this just for, some people are in it just for S's and giggles, but most of us are in this probably for the long term. How will you stay relevant? And that's what I always preach to my corporate clients. How are you going to stay relevant? Because when Airbus Aerial came into the Atlanta market, I know when they came to the meeting, I was like, oh my God. Call them, they were like, we're doing high altitude, don't worry about it. And so I was like, yeah, I can't fly that high. They're like, FAA doesn't even govern where we are. And I was like, yeah. So how do you stay relevant? So we talked about that a little bit, I know, as a team, and then we're going to open the floor to questions.
I think I think the first thing is just staying up to date, coming to conferences, staying up on the news. For me, I'm always reading content and podcasts. And then I've started over the last couple months, 4 or 5 months, I've started to look into mapping and looking at how to implement going into that field and buying bigger birds and buying bigger drones. So if you keep pushing the limits and keep trying to figure out, maintaining your niche, but pushing it to where you are challenged a little bit more, I think that's my personal, what I'm doing.
Continually reinventing.
Yeah, exactly. You can't just settle on like, oh, I have a Phantom that's gonna last me for 30 years, like I flew a Phantom for the first 2 years, and now I'm flying Inspires consistently. I want to get into Matrices. I want to get into bigger birds. So I think constantly pushing it, because unless your niche is, my niche is going to be the Charlotte video production, getting the local clients in Charlotte. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's your niche, go for it. If your niche is pushing to be bigger, then you want to be constantly reading and soaking up as much material and then applying it.
I think you've got to get out there. I'm a big relationship kind of person, and you can make your scope way too broad, and you can try to be everything to everybody, and at the end of the day, your phone's not ringing because you're doing everything. So I think you need to focus in what you do good, and then move on from there. You know, I'm big into the, you know, price is what you pay and value is what you get. So if you think I'm expensive, go hire an amateur. And when they, right, and then when they fly that Mavic into a $1 billion asset-centric AT&T tower, and you don't have any liability, and it's a guy with a drone and a dog and a Mavic, that's not good. So where I'm trying to go with this is I'm sort of looking at the down the road. You know, yesterday CNN talked about, you know, operations over people. That is absolutely huge. I mean, that's why CNN Air started that. Where I'm going with this is I'm more or less on what we call beyond visual line of sight. There are a lot of test markets going on right now, and this is mostly with a fixed air wing. It's not a copter, it's an actual airplane. So if I want to, as they say, amortize my capital or get a return on investment, I've got to have that bird up in the air for a long time. So that means battery has to be good. That means that I can fly for miles without bringing the bird down legally, and number one, I'm safe. So if I can fly that bird down power lines, and I can look for this bad stuff called corona detection and pointing and all these big terms that you can't see with a naked eye, but you get a thermal camera on the gimbal of one of those fixed wings, wow, you can save a company a lot of money, and you can get that information back really, really quick. So as Gretzky said, you know, you skate to where the puck is going. So I think I'm looking forward to drones that are going to be larger than 55 pounds.
Yes.
I think from a commercial standpoint, that's where everything's headed. But we got to have the laws in place, and I will say this, and I'll end it with this: the FCC and the regulations and the compliance never keep up with technology, and it never keeps up with Silicon Valley, and never keeps up with innovation. So I always say that the FCC is, and excuse my pun here, dog years behind innovation, because it's maybe not 7 years as a dog year, but they're looking at safety first. So you sort of got to put that into your business model.
I may have missed my industry because Bob's talking about spotting coronas with the naked eye. I'm pretty good at it. I can find a corona.
Yeah, I like corona.
You know, you talk about you know, artificial intelligence and, you know, all the automation coming with that. You know, I don't have my eyes shut, but I still think the manned pilot still has quite a few years, you know, the next 3 to 5 years. You know, we look at Lance. You know, Lance is being tested at 4 airports. That's the low altitude, you know, the notification where you, who is Air, it wasn't AirMap, it was the other guys.
SkyQuest.
Yeah, Skyward?
There's Skyward.
Sorry, Skyward. And they got that. But the other vendors are going to get that too. So you're going to find that it's managed by these third parties. So what that means is if you go into low altitude airspace and you use that application, they have instant approval because they're using the FAA UAS maps, their facility maps. So they know up to what altitude they can give instant approval for. If you need that link for the FAA UAS map, I've got it on my Academy website. It's on the resource page. You can just click through and look at that. You can Google FAA UAS facility maps and you'll find that. It's a helpful tool because if you're filling out an authorization or waiver, look at the altitude that they've already got designated as safe, and your approval is going to be much, much quicker. I'm not telling you you're going to beat the 90 days, but it'll be much quicker than what it would normally be, okay? You know, in terms of automation and that end of it, you know, if you want to keep up with the industry, Twitter is a great tool. Everybody is on Twitter in this industry. The influencers. At lunch today, you're going to hear from Hogan Lovells. That's Lisa Ellman and Gretchen West, that group. They run the Commercial Drone Alliance. The other good one is to keep up with the Small UAV Coalition. If you want to hear about the industry developments and what's going on with the legislation and that, you'll hear about all the major players if you keep up with those groups. They're worth listening to at lunch. They're the ones that helped CNN file for their authorization with the FAA. So good resources to have. You know, if you want to learn about that technology and development, that's the best way to do it, is just to keep up with the industry pulses, and then trying to, you know, read the tea tree, what do they say, the tea leaves? You know, if you can do that, you know, you probably could pick stocks too, you know, in that regard. Keep up with the influencers and these folks, because where they're spending that time, there's a lot of debate now. You've got one side of the house thinks that ADS-B is going to be a solution. Another one says Wi-Fi. You know, the one that we know worked over in Europe when they started testing it was the whole cell bandwidth. You know, and you probably know a lot more about that spectrum than I do. So those are the things that you want to start looking towards, because that's where you're going to want to invest in equipment, you know, as you go down the road, so that you can be part of that autonomous workflow when that time comes. I still think we're a massive way away from, not massive, we're still a good 2 years as a small-time operator away from that. But it's certainly something that you want to look at the air maps and these guys that are tied into that, using their technology to leverage it.
And start, you know, managing your revenue strategy so that you can be prepared, because we talked yesterday about drone leasing and equipment leasing, because it's going to be very expensive to keep up with this. You know, it's just like the phone. It's like before you, it's like it's already obsolete, and then here's another one coming out. So how can you do that and then keep yourself afloat? Because this stuff gets expensive really fast. Let's open the floor, because there's tons of questions here. Yes, sir.
A couple of questions for all four of you. First one is startup costs. And let's say a year to 5 years, okay, or a year to 2 years, maybe 2 years. I'd like to know what you foresee, because all of you are sort of a different pattern for the most part.
Startup.
What do you, your industry,
Yeah.
what, $500,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish. I'm not a Part 107, so I'm probably a little bit different, because you know, it's sort of billable hours and how I can help you do that, right. But I would say, and these are the experts right here, because they've actually, I mean, they've got the hardware and the software and all that.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No,
I was saying, you
I
know,
love being
he's
on
on the
the spot.
enterprise
I
level.
love that, you know. But I mean, the barrier of entry is that we've talked about is much lower than it was. I mean, for $1,500, $2,000, and the $150 knowledge test, you're in business. But
If you have a market.
But again, you know, I use the CNN business model. That's just the starting point for those guys. Just because you have a 107 doesn't mean you're going to get a job, right?
Yeah, we have, you can go to Best Buy right now and go buy an Inspire or Phantom. I mean, so you think about that price, the $150 for the test, and then it just depends on, like you were saying, the market level. And for some of our bigger clients, we have a hotel chain that we shoot with. They want $5 million in insurance.
Exactly.
So you have to budget for that for the year, you know, and that's not cheap. And we have full spectrum, whole insurance. So if the drone crashes, we get the market level back of that drone. Trust me, in the Caribbean and other places like that, you need it, because you never know when you may have an accident. So that's on some bigger client scales. But if the smaller, you know, if you're local businesses and whatnot, most of them won't care about insurance. I use the Verifly app. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. That cuts down on your liability. So that's a cheap option to, hey, I need to fly in this area for an hour. That costs $25. You know, that's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. So you have the Verify app that I use, and then it just depends on what your product is. If you're doing a full-scale video, then you need editing software. You need, and that's not, you know, we do a lot of groundwork as well with some of our videos. So if you're just going for aerials only, to me, I find it a little more challenging. I don't know how you feel, but I feel like a lot of people want the whole package. They want the aerials with the ground, with the editing, and if you're just doing aerials of a real estate, then you're not going to make that much. You're going to have to do a lot of those jobs to make that return on your investment.
Tom, you have your own edit capability. Is that something that would be worthwhile to contract for?
It just depends on how comfortable you feel. I know a lot of people. I know a couple people, friends of mine, who just that's not their skill, is editing.
I don't edit.
Yeah.
Don't ever plan on it.
So
outsource it.
So you outsource it, and that may cost you more than it would be. It just depends on your comfortability with it. I've been in local news for 8 years, and I edit every day. Yeah.
And you've got an eye for it.
Yeah, exactly. So you have different editing techniques. You may want graphics. So I think it's more common for people to outsource, unless it's just something for us to keep our costs down, and because we're not dealing with clients that are asking for a lot of After Effects or things like that, we just do it. It takes 2 seconds to put it in a timeline and send them, a minute video.
That may be a great opportunity for colleagues,
Yeah.
to tie into each other, and trade some of these skills, some of these, different technical capabilities. You talk about, how do you plan and forecast and budget for it? It depends on what's your solution. We have any photographers? Yeah, so I figured we would, right?
Yeah.
So if I asked you what would it take to start a photography business over the next 2 years, you'd probably say, what would you tell me? What market am I serving? Am I doing news? Am I doing, a portrait studio? Am I people coming walking in? What equipment am I shooting products? Am I going into a car dealership to shoot, that end of it? So, it's a little bit hard to put a number or your finger right on precisely what you're looking for. And it's a great question, because as a business owner, you've got to know that information. What is that solution and what equipment do I need? Because there's going to be a delineation between aircraft down the road. You're going to have what we're seeing now as the prosumer, that kind of middle of the road stuff. It's going to be a greater delineation because of what's going to have to go into these birds for the automation. And so, the projection is probably the larger number is going to be the value above $25,000, and that's going to be on the low end. The Intel stuff that they're flying now, you're talking about $40,000 for those birds, and that's the stuff that is going to be doing the bridge inspections. It's going to be doing the cell tower stuff, all of the automated things. It's got that really smart capability, and so that's where you start talking about how serious am I about this. So educating yourself. How much am I willing to invest to learn about what these things can or can't do? Because a lot of it, you've got to just kind of jump in and catch part of that wave and be part of that wave to create that. Was it Al yesterday that said, it's up to us over where the industry goes?
Yeah. He did. And I think if you're just starting out, just as some rough numbers, as you're just trying to kind of figure out your niche, and I think Thomas said it, somewhere around that 3,000 mark should probably get you about right, because you're going to need your iPad, and we're talking about how much you can burn those out, and your backup batteries, and so just to do some basic, to kind of start you off basically, that 3,000 to 5,000, but then it's variable after that. But yeah, before you go and invest in a very expensive big drone, you got to have the market for it. But then you need to be able to fly it so that you can be proficient at it.
Well, and when
so it's chicken and egg, right?
When you crash that one bird, have you budgeted for the second one?
For the second.
Yeah, the
Or
redundancy.
Yeah. Jeff, how are you planning for that? I would love to hear how you're doing that. So when you
On which end?
On the redundancies. I know you said you usually travel like 3 drones, usually of the same type, often to get what you
so
need.
that's one of the selling points we make is, the redundancy on the Phantom 4 Pros. You've got the Phantom 4, you got the Pro Plus with that little screen on it. Well, that doesn't work if you're trying to download proprietary software. You can only download DJI stuff on there. It's a great device, but if you're going out to do cell towers, they want you to use what's the autopilot? Autopilot. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
To be able to shoot those. So you've got to just be able to plan for that equipment. If you're looking at doing work for some of the enterprise setups, they require a minimum of 6 batteries. You've got to have a rapid way of recharging, things like that. So, the idea here is educate yourself. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube. There's a lot of garbage on YouTube. So you've got to figure out where it comes from, what you're looking at, an credible source. So when you look at what you're budgeting, that's all part of it. What's your aspect that you're trying to position it with, and the redundancy, the spare equipment. CNN. Yesterday John was talking about, what they travel with in terms of, I carry extra controllers, so that you've always got something charged. The iPads, how many of you use the iPad in the summer heat down here? How long does that last? On a really hot day, it's less than an hour. We literally have had those things either sitting in the air-conditioned car or on ice to try and get them back down to the temperature. You probably have a lot of equipment.
Yeah.
We got a question in the back.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for being on the panel. I started in the industry a year ago at the summit put on by the state of Georgia Economic Development. And at that time, it seemed the business opportunity specific to Georgia was going to be marrying the needs of the producers in Hollywood with action shot video here in Georgia. But that doesn't seem to have materialized, and then we heard yesterday just pure numbers of the opportunities on infrastructure. And specifically, we hear there's 150 cell towers, just with 150,000 cell towers with AT&T. I'm trying to really understand the specific market that this technology can really grow on. I know everybody in the room's trying to do this, but is it cell towers? And if it's cell towers, I understand there's challenges with the aerial photography from microwave interference. And how is that being handled? So if I'm going down the right path and I'm saying, here's the biggest opportunity, but there's a technical challenge, how is AT&T or somebody like that responding to that?
That's a great question, and I was going to bring this up. When I say drone as a service, if I'm on 107 right now, I'm gonna, if I want to, get a subscription and get monthly business, I'm gonna go to that cell tower company. I'm gonna go to that railroad. I'm gonna go to that short line railroad, whatever it may be in the industrial type businesses, and I'm gonna say, can I get on your preferred vendor list? Okay? I want to be vetted, just like you're vetted for the FAA. It's like, what do I need to do so I can get a bid like you did, and all of a sudden you got 2 bids, and all of a sudden people are knocking on your door. The height curve, I'm not buying a lot of it. I think from a commercial standpoint, in what I do, I think we're sort of going down to the bottom of all these drones. There's 600,000 registrations or drones out there, and you see a lot of people going out of business right now, okay? The commercial side is good because we've got use cases right now. We've been doing this for 2 to 3 to 4 years now. So we've got, we did the proof of concept, and now we've got use cases. This is what we did in Hurricane Irma. This is how we saved lives. I've got a deal right here, came out of Wall Street 3 days ago. Who is it? Travelers. They did almost 1,000 drone inspections, okay, in 2 hurricanes. And they did that with their own agents. They didn't hire that out. So I think it's how you monetize that situation. Public safety is I think really about to blow up into a huge opportunity because it takes bad things to make technology good sometimes, as we all, even in telecom and even in drones. We've had floods and winds in Puerto Rico. I just had a friend, I'm a member of the AUVSI Atlanta chapter, and that is the world's largest nonprofit group for the advancement of robotics and unmanned systems international. So the guy didn't show up, and it's like, well, where's Matt? And it's like, well, he's in Puerto Rico right now. Really? What's he doing in Puerto Rico? He said, well, he got a job to go down there and fly drones for inspections and for search and rescue for 3 months. He won't be back for 3 months. And I've talked to a couple people in here that's gotten the same email. So I think if you can set yourself up for those kind of positions, you're going to have a lot of things that grow. And I think, again, the Part 107, yeah, it sounds good, 150,000 cell towers, and you've got 300,000 miles of Class 1 railroad, freight ones, but we're beyond visual line of sight.
Yeah.
So, boy, if I could just get that fixed wing and I can just go down all that railroad, that's just, and it's over private land, by the way. Railroad's private land, towers aren't. A tower is a vertical thing. So I can't make a lot of money going up on a tower, doing an aerial view, turning that into all these beautiful orthomosaic pictures and all the big words and the LiDAR and how we do test and measurement. Those gimbals are really expensive, I mean, they're proud of their gimbals, let me tell you, and proud of their sensors, and they're very expensive, and then tomorrow it's out of date. So if I can go up and over, maybe there's something called a VTOL, which is a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. So it's a copter and a fixed wing.
I'm sure that's coming. Well, and let me say,
they're out there.
right, as you're going to say,
They're out
exactly.
there.
And the last thing I'll say on next, you bring up a great point, and I live where I live in Atlanta. It's movie shooting literally every day. We all actually ran out of our house the other day thinking that there was some major catastrophe, and we didn't realize it was a shoot going on, and it was just chaos. But a lot of the folks that I talk to in the entertainment industry, they're bringing their people with them, with their equipment. And so there are opportunities here, but it's making sure you're getting plugged in. But I think that it's evolving, and I think BLOS is going to be a game changer. So right now, everybody's doing ag, doing inspection, and then some people are, using this for entertainment, some filmmaking. But I think it's kind of the calm before the storm of opportunity. And it varies, but you've got to definitely be in the right network to get the opportunity, and then everything you said, to have the right equipment so that you can be better positioned. But I think that we're just, as folks are figuring this out, once they do, I think the doors are going to open. Other questions?
I just wanted to say one thing. We're talking about startup, but after startup, you've got to make a living. And there are so many people out there that are undercutting everybody else. Now, there's a person in here I talked to yesterday. He was charging $200 to do a real estate shoot. I charge $4. Why? I feel like my time is worth that money. Now, if I go out and shoot a house, that's an hour there, or I may drive an hour to get there and back. I've got to figure that time plus editing time. So I figure my time with the startup, with my drone and the cameras, is worth $400. But when we go in and keep undercutting each other, we're killing our own industry.
Well, I think, just to open my big mouth, I think that you'll find that the people that are undercutting you will soon be out of business. And it's stamina, it's being able to weather that storm of people coming in. And if they're flying for $200 an hour, you're right, they're not getting the product that you get.
Right.
And you get into a business.
Well, and that's why it ties back to what you were saying with the selling.
I'm sorry to jump in.
No,
And
you're
education.
fine. It ties back into selling. If you deliver on a product, you get that person to write a review, you get somebody to network, then and you're aggressive in the way you do it on social media and in person, then you'll start to see a trickle down.
Yes, sir.
Bouncing off of this same topic, someone that's trying to come into the industry, the last thing I'm trying to do is undercut. So I would love to hear, as a group, averages, video, photography, like kind of things. But I'm just curious about what kind of prices we're charging. Real estate, inspections, etc.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to have you, because basically your question is averages based on type of project. Did I hear you right? All right.
What was that game show, the $64,000 question?
Yeah, right.
That's one of those.
Right.
And John, it was John, right? They'd asked about the, with the AT&T stuff, I think it's Art Pregler, is that his name?
Yes.
He goes to some of the conferences, and he'll talk about how AT&T's using the drones. I just was going to add 30 seconds to what you had asked about. And you know what? They made all the big press releases, but they were still trying to figure out exactly how to employ those. And so what you'll find is the structure is they use a few vendors, and those vendors use a few vendors, and they subcontract that out as you learn more about it. That's where you get into the environment, and you learn from the other folks, and maybe you become colleagues with the people that are undercutting it, because they think that's their entry point. And it's not the best entry point, right? We know that if you sell by price, you die by price, right? And eventually it catches up to you, and then they'll be out of business, like you said. But when you talk about pricing your product, that's a tough one for me to answer, because when you go market by market, and it depends on what you're doing. You know, are you doing $1 million homes on a lake, and you know, you're putting together the angles and the things and all of that to go together? You know, that's a high-end premium product there.
Yeah.
You know, are you shooting for a commercial for an advertising agency? Are you shooting for, you know, I don't know, somebody that's, right now they're taking photos on their iPhone, so they're not really particular with what they're getting. You know, so you got to look at what market and where that falls into. And that's where, if you get to know some of the other folks and you get together with them, you can kind of understand that and you can learn a little bit. Rather, I think we're so guarded with some of this stuff that, you know, if we share it, it actually builds the industry up.
Yeah, there's a difference between Amazon and the YMCA.
Yeah.
You know, there's a difference between that client. So you, not that you're gauging the client to see what they'll pay, but you have to know what they're looking for. And like for us, we bundle, like you were saying, we bundle videos, we bundle how many pictures we're going to give you. One thing that I think will benefit everybody is don't give your raw away. Your raw video and your raw pictures, those are your rights. If you sell them their rights, you can make a lot of money from that. So when we give raw video or give raw pictures, we're charging a good amount, because that is something that we took with our time and our specialized skills to deliver. And then if we give you all that video, all those pictures, you can manipulate it however you want, and that may not reflect on us in the best way. Because, you know, if you're a news photographer you're not giving somebody else your picture to put in the paper and then to edit it. You're editing it and making it the best it can be for the client. So I would say, just like he was saying, just on the scale of looking at what your client is and looking at what kind of product, and you'll get into a rhythm of feeling out where somebody will, all right, I'm overshooting on that price, or I'm underselling on that price.
Can I just add to that? It's like somebody up there mentioned the
Cost.
NPPAs.
Yeah. ASMP is a good resource.
Yeah, well, the NPPA has the
Cost of goods, the calculator.
Yeah, cost of doing business calculator. If you go in there and you can put in how much is your insurance, how much is your overhead, what's your equipment.
You're a photographer, aren't you?
Yes. And I also teach a business of photography class. So, you know, all of that. What salary do you need to make to cover your own personal overhead? How much can you work? How much will you work? All of those kind of things. It will put together a guideline for what your costs are, and how then, that's at least your minimum cost of what you should be charging somebody. And then, you know, what Thomas is saying is then the usage on top of it. So there's not really, I can't say, charge $100 an hour, that's perfect. You charge $400 an hour, that's perfect. It's all really based on what your cost of your business is to have a sustainable business.
And then you also want to be consistent also with the market. You know, and granted, most people, most depends on the entity, don't publish their prices, some do. But you want to probably do as much homework as you can just to get a gauge, because even though your costs may be significantly lower, you also like, well, wait a minute, what am I doing differently? Are they flying better? What are they doing? And granted, you said something really, and I'm going to take one last question here. You said something earlier. It's also about skill level. Yeah. Because if you've got a pilot that's been flying for a long time, that's amazingly skilled, that's got a lot of value versus someone who's just getting started, who's doing a decent job, but doesn't have the same capability and skill level.
Demo reels are very key with that.
Demo reels
are very key with showing how diverse you are, showing what you can do, specify demo reels to, hey, this is how I shoot homes. And if somebody sees that cool reveal over the home and it goes onto the lake and you fly right over the lake, that may be the shot that goes, all right, that's the guy I want. So having those specific reels and specific qualities pertaining to what you're shooting for.
Last question, yes, sir.
That raises a good point with regards to pricing. You know, when you're looking at just technical mapping or surveying, you know, and maybe Jeff, you can speak to this, you're generally against a predefined kind of pricing. Whereas in the creative side, it's really up in the air. So it's really gives you more flexibility, gives you more range perhaps in terms of your pricing, because you're pricing your creativity.
If you bundle like we do with the ground and aerials and editing, that price point for that package is so much more than, hey, I'll shoot the aerials, here's the end product. It's if you're doing more and they will be more willing to pay for it. The challenge I find is you're either doing a lot more work, or not a lot more work, but you're doing more work or more different things, and you're getting paid more, or you're doing simple, hey, I can go put one battery up, shoot a bunch of homes, and I'm getting paid for a lot of jobs that are minimal amount. So you got to find that balance.
And one other quick question. So there's these organizations out there, there's, SkyTank, I think was one of them. And so they appeal to pilots all over to register, send your demo stuff, register on their stuff, and they will bring business in your area. And because it seems like a very localized sort of regional business anyway, because of regulations, because of relationships, and the competition. So do you have any experience, or do you have any experience with these types of organizations? Because I don't know whether they're effective or they're worth or not, but I guess why not?
Yeah. And we'll make this a brief.
Yeah, I have not had any experience. I find there's, I can't remember, there's one of them I actually subscribe to, and the payouts are very minimal. So,
yeah, I did some interviews just to learn about that, and I'm writing a few articles with some of these folks just to learn about their business, and then, is it a good fit for a new pilot? And you get a lot of mixed feedback in the market. So I went out and flew a mission for one of them just to try it out, see what it did. What I think is it's a good way for somebody starting out to build up a portfolio, because some of them you go out and you shoot the property, and then they put it on the market to see if they can sell it to that realtor or whomever. Okay, that's one of the market spaces that operates that way. The other one will come out, they got client-based missions where they'll pay. Now, and they're not a premium pay, is what you're gonna find in the marketplace, but it's a good way to build up a portfolio for a guy starting out. And then they've got some education tied around it, so you can learn how to shoot a pano, all these things. They've got some videos tied to it. So, is it a place for some folks? Yeah. If I'm gonna fly GIS stuff with LiDAR, no, it's not a good place to start. Right.
And it's probably just because no one's figured out that business model well yet. That's it. Thank you.